Hey guys, welcome back to We Met at Acme. I'm so excited to be here with Les from Balanced Black Girl podcast. Hi.
Hi, thank you for having me, Lindsay.
Thanks for being here. First of all, you are glowing. Like you look like a real life Disney princess. Has
Oh,
anyone ever told you that?
I do get that from time to time. I think it's the eyes.
Definitely the eyes. Like when I make myself into a Disney character on like that TikTok
Yeah.
filter, my eyes become like yours. It's
Thank
amazing.
you.
What is your favorite romantic gesture for someone to
Ooh,
do to
my
you?
favorite romantic gesture. I mean, I'm a words girly, so I love a good
Mhm.
a good love letter.
I love that.
Yeah,
Wait, are you a Leo?
I am.
Okay, that's what I thought based on stalking you on social, but I couldn't 100% confirm. Do you know
Mhm.
your rising and moon?
Yeah, I'm a Taurus moon, Libra
Okay.
rising.
Oh, love.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so you're a Libra rising. Do you feel like you have people pleasing tendencies because of the Libra rising or not really?
I can at
Mm-hmm.
times for sure. I'm also a Libra Venus, so that's
Mm,
like kind of a lot of Libra.
yeah.
And so I can, but as I've gotten older, I've learned how to like notice when I'm doing it and
Right.
mitigate a bit.
Right. It's interesting that you have so much Libra in your chart because Libra is all about like partnerships and being in a relationship. And you are so outspoken about, not doing that, especially if it doesn't serve you. So, my next question is obviously relationship status at the moment.
Single currently. And I've had it both ways. It was like I spent my whole 20s in relationships. I was
Hmm.
pretty much in relationships back to back from 19 to 28,
Yeah.
maybe a few months in between each one. And then my 30s have been like the polar opposite. So it's like I've experienced both versions for sure.
What made you kind of stop doing the serial monogamy thing as you turned 30? Were you just like, these people aren't worth my time, or I want more time for myself, or what was it?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, the relationships that I was in my 20s, I kind of stumbled into them and I wasn't very intentional about it. I I would just, I don't know, like wake up one day like with a boyfriend or be like, "Oh, this guy likes me or this guy is pursuing me." Okay, that's it. And then 2
Mhm.
years later, I'm like, "Wait, why am I still dating this person or
Yeah.
do I even want to be here?" And so after my last serious relationship ended, which was pretty long, it was like 4 years, I then just wanted to be a lot more intentional about it. And the more aware and intentional I became, the more selective I became.
That makes a lot of sense. And similar to me, you actually started your podcast not like because of a breakup, but after a breakup of
Yes.
sorts. Was
Yes.
that the 4-year one or a
It
different one?
was. Yeah,
Okay.
the 4-year one.
So what made you want to start the podcast from that breakup? Like what, was the mentality there?
So at the time, I was just going through a lot. It was like peak Saturn return. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
yeah, I'm pretty
Mhm.
astrology. I'm like an astrology
Oh,
geek,
I'm
so
so
we
glad.
can go all
We
in.
can talk our
So it was
language.
during, yeah, exactly. People who get it. It was during my Saturn return. It was like everything was kind of getting rocked for me. It was like that relationship ended. I was going through a lot of career transitions. I had been creating content, primarily fitness content and blogging, and that wasn't really working. And I'd stepped away from it. And I was just in such a big transition period in my life. And I was kind of like waiting for the next thing. And so when I got the idea to start my podcast, I just immediately jumped on it. I got the idea for my podcast. I immediately went on Amazon, ordered a microphone, and launched the show like a week later because I finally felt some inspiration and I
Right.
just went for it.
That's so great. But like you said you got the idea.
Mhm.
How, like, walk us through that process, for someone going through a new breakup.
Yeah.
I always talk about how a breakup is like the time to, use that, channel that energy into something creative. If
Yeah.
you want, right? If you're a creative person. So, what light bulb went off in your head that was like it's time? Was it
Yeah.
just like I'm hurt and I want to share this with people, or more like I feel like I've done all this work and I am ready to talk about it?
It was more so like wanting to use my energy differently. So for that particular relationship and even that breakup, it took us like a year to fully break up. Like it
Mhm.
was very toxic, a lot of like back and forth and codependency. And I had spent a solid year in the process of breaking up trying to make a relationship work that wasn't working.
Right.
So when I finally realized this is not going to work, this person is, nothing bad, no bad feelings against him, but, like, we have taken this relationship as far as we're going to go. When I finally started putting my energy elsewhere as opposed to in a relationship that's not working, it then opened up new creativity for me. Then my self-care got a little bit better. It was just all of this energy that I was pouring towards something that wasn't working, I was able to put it towards more constructive spaces.
What was the last straw for you in that relationship? Because I know that so many people find themselves in toxic relationships and
Mhm.
it's strong, amazing women or men, whatever. And it's still really hard to leave. Like, how were you able to see it clearly?
For me, the final straw was realizing if I stay in this, I'm never going to get what I need. This person does not have the ability, desire, or capacity to fully give me what I need. And if I leave this, I could meet someone new tomorrow who could. Still could. But if I stay in this, I am making a personal guarantee to myself that I will never get what I need because this person will never be able to give it to me.
So it was coming from a place of like confidence in knowing what you deserved
Yeah.
and that you weren't getting what you deserved.
Exactly. And that it wasn't going to happen if I stayed in that situation.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Did you go through therapy at that point that, like, helped also, sometimes, like, as a mirror, make you
Mhm.
hear yourself and stuff like that?
I did. I'd gone to therapy for, like, a lot of different reasons because I was really going through it. Like, also around that season, my grandma had just died. I had a really toxic job that was giving me a lot of anxiety, and then the boy stress. So I went to
Yeah.
therapy for, like, all things.
Yeah.
It was, like, all hands on deck at that
Right.
point, and it was really helpful for sure.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So I just listened to one of your episodes and you were talking about, turning 35 recently, which congratulations.
Thank
It's
you.
amazing. I feel like it's such an exciting year. Like I'll be 35 in 2 years and I'm looking forward to it.
Mhm.
Like I'm no longer like, "Oh my god, 30." Like I know that it's the best. And actually my mom always tells me the 40s are the best, so
Mhm.
the best is yet to come, but
Yes.
you talk about, dating or not dating, right, at 35. How do you like, for all of our listeners who are, let's say, 25 right now, how is it different than dating at 25? You mentioned, like, being more selective and being more intentional,
Yeah.
but actually, when you are physically on these dates,
Yeah.
what's different?
I mean, I think when I was younger, dating and the idea of dating consumed so much of me. If I was not actively on a date, then I was actively on the apps. I was actively trying to procure my next date. I would make decisions about where I would go or how I would spend my weekends based on, like, will there be guys there? Maybe I could meet somebody. It was like constantly consuming everything. Versus now, it's more like I'm living, I'm doing the things I want to do. If I meet somebody, great. And if not, that's okay too, because that's not why I'm there. Like, that's not why I'm
Mhm.
here on earth, you know?
Yeah. It's so scary. I just remember when I was single, and I would be literally scared if I didn't go out that night
Mhm.
that
Right.
I would be
I could miss an
missing.
opportunity. What if it
Yeah,
happens?
and
What if he's
it's
there?
just so I mean,
It's
especially in
exhausting.
your 30s,
Yeah.
there's no way that, like, one night is making a difference. I think because I was single at 29, which is obviously different than 35, but it's still what annoying society considers as, like, hurry it up,
Mhm.
And I remember I was like, "I don't wanna go out with other single girlfriends and, like, do the, like, let's hang at a bar and hope to be approached." I was like, "I just wanna kind of do my own journey." And if that's going on dating apps and going on dates, like, that's what I wanted to do. To me, it felt better, you know?
For sure, and it's like you wanna spend your time doing things that you actually enjoy.
Right.
And so I had a moment with myself where I was like, I don't actually enjoy being on dating apps going back and forth with people. It literally
Right.
feels like work. As a content creator, responding to DMs and stuff is literally work, and that's how being on dating apps felt. It felt like my job, only honestly worse because I would rather interact with my community.
Yeah, yeah,
They're more
totally.
fun to interact with than, like,
Uh-huh.
random dudes. I was like, "I'm not enjoying this." Like, life
Mhm.
is too short to spend so much time doing things that I'm not enjoying.
Yeah. So how do you now like cancel out the noise of I'm assuming there's at least one person in your life. Maybe it's your parents, maybe it's like your married friends, whoever it is, being like, "Les, like you're such a good catch. Like don't you think you should like, go on more dates or be on this app or, how do you ignore that?"
It's interesting. I'm really lucky that the people in my life who are close to me don't I don't feel any of that pressure at all from my parents, from my
Mhm.
family. A lot of my friends are in very similar positions. And
Mhm.
so I don't really have any of that from people close to me. It's actually kind of my audience who I feel more of that pressure from of like, well, why don't you talk about dating? Well, why don't you share more? I'm like, girl, I don't go on dates. I don't got
Right.
nothing to share.
Mhm.
Anytime I do like a Q&A on Instagram, there's always all of these dating questions. And I'm like, you guys, I don't have anything to say.
Right, like, they think that
So
you're hiding it almost.
yeah, and so sometimes I feel pressure in that regards of like, "Oh, like, this is what everybody wants, and I can't give it to them," but I have to remind myself that they're not living my life. Even when I was in all of those relationships in my 20s that were literally terrible and I was miserable, those other people who have those expectations of what I should be doing, they weren't in those relationships with me,
Right.
being mistreated the way I was being
Mhm.
mistreated, being sad, be all of those things. They weren't experiencing that. I was. And so I try to remember that when people are putting pressure to do certain things or to have certain experiences is like you're the only one living your life and so you get to choose how you want to feel and I don't let other people have that much power over how I feel.
That's so true. You also shared 35 things that you've learned
Yeah.
when you turn 35.
Uh-huh.
Can you share, like, 3 of those with my listeners, just, like, from the bunch that
Yeah,
were
I
your
mean, I think that
favorites?
probably one of them that was most relevant that causes a little bit of stir is I said you don't need a boyfriend, you need hobbies. And a lot of that was a message to like my 23-year-old self who I
Right.
had dated this guy for a few years out of college. Really nice guy, but I honestly didn't like him that much. I literally was in a relationship with this man for 2 years purely because I was just bored. I'd
Yeah.
gotten out of school, didn't really have anything to do after work. I had no hobbies, didn't really have a lot of friends, so I just got a boyfriend instead. And that's not to say that like romantic relationships are bad or that wanting them is bad. It's not. It's human nature. Of course, we all want to be loved. But when you're seeking these things out, are you doing that from a genuine place or are you doing it because you're bored? If you're
Right.
doing it because you're bored, there's other ways to fill that time and to get into a healthier relationship than what you're doing.
Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah.
I but, like, it's not something that you can accept at that time, you know?
Yeah.
You're just like, they are your hobby.
Exactly. That
What's
poor
an
guy, I like bossed him. I spent like 2 years bossing that poor man
Oh
around.
god. I've definitely dated people before simply because they liked me.
Yes, that's been all of my relationships thus
Yeah.
far. Yeah.
Like, there was no mutual I was just like, "Oh,
Mhm.
they're really into me, and that makes me feel good."
Yeah. Yeah.
Terrible.
That's been all of my experiences thus far.
What's another one that
Um,
was
a
controversial?
couple of other ones. What did I say? I said something along the lines of like, be discerning about who you take advice from because most people are talking
Mm,
to hear themselves talk.
mm,
I also said it on another episode of the podcast that I recorded but haven't released yet is that there's a difference between yapping and speaking. Most people are yapping, but they're not actually saying anything of value. So, like, be mindful of who you're taking advice from, even to what we're just saying when other people project or have their opinions. Where is that coming from? It's probably
right.
coming from something within them. Do you want to trade lives with them? You probably don't.
Right,
So,
yeah, no,
their
that's
opinions
so
aren't that
true, like,
important.
I always say don't take advice from someone whose life you wouldn't want.
Yes. Whole life, not cherry picking, whole
Totally.
life.
Mhm,
Would you
especially
want?
relationship advice.
Oh, yeah.
Like, there's so many people out here giving marriage advice who, like and again, like, maybe they're extremely qualified, of course, there are exceptions, but a lot of people who give relationship advice like, for example, there was this one woman who wrote this very famous book. I'm gonna bleep this out, so I'll tell it to you. It's called Why Men Love Bitches.
Oh, yeah, I
Have
remember
you heard
that
of
book.
it?
Yeah. I
Okay.
haven't read it, but I've
And
seen it.
she came on my podcast, and she wouldn't let me ask her her relationship status because she was single,
Yeah.
and she thought that, like, whatever. And but by the way, being single shouldn't define who you are as a person, and you and I are gonna get into this.
Yeah.
But I guess because it was like her career, she was so, crippled by that fact that she wouldn't like let me talk about it. And I just feel like she thought that it was like negating her whole message, you know?
Yeah. That's so
Yeah.
sad.
I know. I know it was really sad. And speaking of that sadness, kind of like this whole narrative of being not like what's the exact term? Because I feel like people don't love the term single, right? Like, is it just like not partnered or
Yeah. I mean, I say single because
right?
I,
It's fine.
yeah.
So why is there this narrative of being single equals not good? And how? do we change that? Because
Yeah.
you are one of the voices who's speaking, not yapping about, how that's not necessarily a bad thing, but
I mean, a lot of it is misogyny, right? Because single is only bad if you're a woman.
mm,
Single men often don't have the same messaging. Single 29-year-old men don't get the same messaging that single 29-year-old women get. So I think a lot of it is misogyny. I think a lot of it comes from this idea that traditionally for women, things like partnering were a form of survival. Most women couldn't even open their own bank account until 50 years ago. That's within the lifetime of our parents. Like, that wasn't that long ago. They quite literally could not be unpartnered and survive in the way society was set up. And so, with that, I think that there's a lot of stigma around this perceived sense of safety. And we're kind of among one of the first generations growing up when that's not really the case. And so I think a lot of it is just like this murkiness of kind of a new normal, a new society. We're like one generation out where things are changing really quickly, but like societal stigma hasn't changed as quickly.
yeah, that's very true. But then, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here just because,
Mhm.
for the conversation.
Yeah.
But what about, like, yes, there's a misogyny, but what
Yeah.
about people who talk about, if kids are in your future, if
Yeah.
kids are something that you want,
Yeah.
what do you do in that situation, right? And
Yeah.
like, how can you come to terms with being happy without that part of your life if it is something that you
Mhm.
want?
Yeah, then I think you just have to make tough decisions, and I think sometimes people feel like there needs to be, like, a tip or a hack for everything, and there's just not. Like, biology is biology. There are many different ways to, like, care for a child in the world, but if you are set on having a biological child and
Right.
carrying and birthing a biological child, there's only a few ways to do that. So you have options, like, does carrying a biological child matter more to you than necessarily the quality of your partner? Because you could probably find somebody to get you pregnant pretty quick,
Right. Or a sperm
or a
bank.
sperm bank. But like, what matters most to you? What is of the highest priority? So if it's
Mm,
purely just like biological motherhood, other things don't really matter. There's ways around that. Or if you decide that you want to do something like egg freezing to extend that window of time, you can do that. But there may not necessarily be a picture perfect answer for everybody. So I think a lot of it is just having hard conversations with yourself of like, what matters most to me? These are the options that I have. How am I going to make the best out of what options I have?
How do you get real with yourself though? And how do you like also continue to have the confidence in that situation? Like, you are clearly a confident woman who's 35, who's single,
Yeah.
who knows their worth, but that's really rare, like, unfortunately, It's really rare to not have your confidence knocked down, if especially if you're actively dating and
Mhm.
not happy with the people out there that you're meeting. I have a few friends who are in that position and they are not feeling confident. So like, how do you have that?
I think it's hard because I'm not somebody who is super set on motherhood. So I've never had a super strong desire to be a mom. It's not to say that I would never have kids,
Mhm.
but I've never felt like, oh, it's something that I need to do. And so I do think for me that eases a lot of the pressure,
Right.
particularly around the age thing. So it's hard if someone does genuinely have that desire. Like I don't know how to help ease that.
Right.
But I think that it's really valid. It's a valid feeling. And I think it's okay to not gaslight yourself and to let yourself feel that feeling and to also recognize this is a part of your life. It's not your whole life. So that is one. I mean, I think what makes dating so hard is it's like you can be doing everything right and still not get the intended desire that you want. And every other area of life is like a little bit different, you know? With fitness, if you work out a certain amount and put in the reps and do the thing, you can get a certain result. At work, if you clock in enough hours or do the things that you need to do, you can get a certain result. But with dating, you can go on a date every single day of the year and it still may not work out in your favor and you can't really control that. So I think trying to find some sense of like peace and confidence in what you can control and recognizing that it's a part of your life and not your whole life, and let yourself be sad about it. If you do feel sad, like have your moments of sadness, but it doesn't mean that you have to have a sad life because of it. You can have a sad moment.
That's such a good call. I never really thought of it that way with like we really can control all these other things, but we can't control how another person feels about us.
No.
And it's so hard
Yeah.
to accept that, especially if you're a type A person
Yeah.
who likes to be in control.
So you can't control other people. And
Mhm.
that's a big factor of it's kind of like the one area of life that does solely depend on how another person feels. And you can't, even if they feel one way today, they might feel another tomorrow. And that's just part of it.
Right. So what would it take for someone to, make less be like, "You know what? My life's amazing, but it's even better with you in it."
Mm. I mean, I think making my life better,
Right.
adding and not subtracting. I do think because of my Libra placements, I realize that I care a lot about like equality. So,
Oh my god, justice is like it's
yeah.
ingrained.
Yes, it's like that fairness of feeling like, is someone bringing as much to this as I am? Do I
Yeah.
feel like I have a partner who is equally yoked? Because if I feel like I'm settling in any way, I'm not into it. If I
Mm.
feel like they're not pulling their weight in the relationship the same way as I am, like I'm not into it. So really that feeling of like an equal partner is what like I
Yeah, it's
love.
so funny that you say that because I'm a Libra sun
Mhm.
and I didn't like I didn't realize how important that was to me, but any as my husband and I, we have a new baby and like we switch off mornings with him.
Mhm.
But there's some times where like I'll do 2 mornings in a row and like I'll be fine with it in the moment, but then it's like almost like right before bed I'm like, "Oh, I've done more." And of course it's never going to be even,
Right.
but it's that like justice like equality thing that just won't shut up inside me.
Yeah, that
It's so
it's
crazy.
like that idea of like, am I being taken advantage of? Am I
Like always on alert.
yeah, am I and it's not transactional. I don't
No.
want people to think that that's what we're saying, but it's almost this feeling of like it's a give and take. And am I
Right.
giving more than I'm getting in the grand scheme of
Well,
things?
it's also like it's a not a scoreboard, but more of like a pulse check. Like I can't find the word, but
Yeah.
for if you're being treated correctly,
Yeah.
and it's really a blessing that we have that inside of us because we know if that starts to slip and we start to not be treated well. And of course,
Yes.
like in the past, you mentioned, you were in a relationship that was way past its expiration date. I have been too. But it's like as we get older, we really know what that treatment looks like and what bad treatment versus good treatment or equal treatment is. And
Exactly.
it's important to have that
For
for
sure.
sure. Um, so a lot of your episodes talk about being the main character or what you say being the sun, which I love how you
More
put that.
Leo, more
Yeah, yeah. So
astrology.
Leo. What does it mean? Because for a lot of people who aren't in TikTok and don't like follow the trends,
Mhm.
they've probably heard main character energy and things like that. But like, what does it really mean in your opinion?
I think it means checking in with yourself and being a priority in your own life. And I think as women in particular, a lot of us are not the priority in our own lives. Other people are the priority in our lives. And of course, like when you're in community with people, when you're in a relationship with people, yes, you support them, you give and receive love, but so many of us put ourselves absolute last.
Mm,
And sometimes in this context of like dating and relationships, we put ourselves last behind people who don't deserve it. So, how are you making sure that you're also a priority to yourself? Because unfortunately, also in a lot of these contexts, we can't necessarily rely on other people to make us a priority. So, if they're not making us a priority and we're not making ourselves a priority, then where do we come in? Where does our happiness, our well being come in? And so, you have to make sure that that's at the forefront.
how do you have that check-in? If you're not in therapy, how can you have that like self-awareness?
I think it's about knowing how you feel when you feel good and knowing when you're not self. I think we all have those qualities of like if we're feeling a little run down, if we're feeling a
Mm,
little taken advantage of, if we're feeling just not our jazzy selves, we know what that's like. Like I know when my fuse gets really short or when I get impatient or when I get snappy, then I'm like, ooh, something's happening here. Let me investigate. And so I
right.
think knowing what that's like for you so that you can get back to that point is really important.
Yeah, I love that. All right, we're gonna do some fun rapid fire questions.
Yeah.
Okay, so these like can be like one word answers or you can elaborate if you feel inclined.
Okay.
One of your best friends forgot your birthday a week ago. She was traveling and under a lot of stress. Would you say something to her?
I would. Yeah. I mean, I think if it bothers you enough to notice, if you're still thinking about it a week later, I would mention, check in, ask her how her travels were and just say, "Hey, I didn't hear from you and this is how I felt about it." And just put it on the table cuz then otherwise it'll fester. Then it will turn into a transactional keeping score thing and it's just I think
Yeah.
better to address it.
Do you think addressing it genuinely with like sensitivity is best or being like, how was your trip? Like, did you have fun celebrating my birthday? Like, I guess, does it
Yeah.
depend on the friend?
I mean, maybe, yeah, it depends on the friend. If that's how you usually talk to I wouldn't say that. I would probably say
Hmm.
something more so along the lines of, like, genuinely being curious how her
Right,
trip
right, right.
went and being like, "I know that you were traveling and really busy. It did hurt my feelings to not hear from you on my birthday, and I'd love to
Right.
talk about it."
Yeah, yeah, totally. Do you think it's normal to drink milk with dinner?
Is this the '80s? In 2024, no. In 1984, maybe?
Right, right, right. When you haven't spoken to a friend in a while, do you assume there's bad blood?
Not necessarily. I think especially the older you get, the more you realize that that's
Mm,
kind of the norm. If
yeah.
your friends start having kids, if you move to a different city, everybody gets kind of busy. And so I think the older you get, the more normal that can be.
It's so true, but I wish there was like a safe word where you
Yeah.
can just text your friend that word to be
Yeah.
like, we're good, even though we're not talking, you
And
know?
people can do that. People
Yeah.
can establish that with their
Right.
friendships.
Yeah. Need to get into that on
Yeah.
on an episode.
Hmm.
Do you think in general people turn out more like their moms or their dads?
Mm. That's a good question. I mean, I think that sometimes can come down to like nature versus nurture, right? I mean, I think it
Like who they spend
depends.
more time with?
Yeah, who they spend more time with and who I don't know. I think it just depends on the person.
So 87% of people said moms.
Mhm.
And I think that's because, like, even when our parents were raising us, it was still less normal for moms to work.
Yeah.
So maybe they spent that time with their moms
Mhm.
more than their dads,
Yeah.
I imagine.
Maybe had more of that
But
bond.
now it's a different ball game. Like your kids in daycare or like your kids, whatever, because both your parents are working is
Mhm.
the norm.
Mhm.
So I'm curious what happens in like, 40 years from now.
Right.
You went through your boyfriend's side table to get a charger and you found an anniversary card from his ex. They broke up 2 years ago. Do you say anything?
Mm, that's a tricky one. That's a tricky one. I probably would say something because I personally don't tend to keep those things from exes because I want to clear that energy out once
Mm,
something is done. So I would probably say something.
yeah. It's hard because I feel like I agree with you, but I would only probably do because I'm like sentimental, but I would only probably do a clear if I were moving in with my partner.
Yeah.
Like that's
If
when
you
I would
share a
clear it
space
out. Right. If
together.
you share a
Yeah.
space together and they have that card, then
Yeah.
that is fucked up.
Then
They
that
brought that
sucks.
through the
Right.
move. Like
Right.
they asked the movers to like handle their card from 2 years ago. That's not okay. But if that was there and their space existed before you,
Mhm.
and again, like, and this is just how I roll, and maybe this isn't great, but I would make like a joke out of it. Like I'd be like, oh, like when we were going to a trip, I'd be like, oh yeah, like get your bag and don't forget your note from your ex.
Happy anniversary.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Don't forget your Annie.
Yeah.
If someone ended things with you and you liked them,
Uh-huh.
would you say all good, no problem, or ask why? Like, would your gist
Mm.
be like all good, no problem? Or would your gist be like, okay, but why?
I would probably say all good, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just like a pride thing or
I mean, I think if somebody doesn't want me, that's all I need to know.
right. Mm-hmm. See, that's the fucking attitude that people need to have walking away from this episode.
Yeah.
If you start seeing someone, when is it okay to send nudes? Dates 1 through 3, 4+ or when official?
Ooh. I'm not a fan of sending nudes because I don't trust anybody with that.
Yeah.
But if I had to say, I would say when official. When you feel
Mm-hmm.
like you really can trust and vouch for
Right.
that person, that you trust that they wouldn't share that with other people.
Yeah. You feel like you should be speaking to your mother-in-law more. Should you be the one calling or texting her, or should she reach out to you?
I think if you feel like you should be speaking to her more, it's fine to reach out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your fiance calls you a bitch during an argument and then doubles down on it. Red flag, deal breaker, or no big deal.
I think that's pretty disrespectful. I wouldn't be okay with that.
It's so crazy. Like 62% of people said red flag.
Yeah.
Only 35% said deal breaker,
Yeah.
and 3% said no big deal, which is crazy to me. But if he's calling you a bitch and he's your fiance, not
Right.
even your husband,
Yeah.
what is he going to call you when he's your husband?
Exactly.
Like, that's
It's
insane.
just super disrespectful.
Totally. And he shouldn't be calling any woman a bitch,
Exactly.
not just you.
Right.
If you're in a hetero relationship, so technically, okay, but let's say that, we'll use your last relationship for an example.
Mhm.
Who went to a better college?
We went to the same college.
Stop.
So there goes that.
Okay, well, there goes that. Do you know any genuinely good guys who don't want kids?
I don't know. I don't know any genuinely good guys.
Stop.
I'm just kidding. No, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I really talked to. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe.
I feel like someone just submitted that poll.
Yeah.
And it took me a second, but I was like, I think she has a point.
Mm.
I don't know a genuinely good guy who doesn't want kids. I think it's very different with women because there's a huge burden on us,
Yeah.
For a man to say he doesn't want kids, I feel like that's being like, I don't have to even do anything. I just don't want to care for someone else,
But I think men who do want kids feel that way. They know that they're not going to be doing most of the work. So I think that's why
Right.
so many more men are willing to say they want kids because they know
Right.
they're not going to do most of the work.
No, that's true. No, that's true. But I don't know.
They get to choose their own adventure. So I think it sounds good.
Right. So then but even that, to your point, then why wouldn't a man? What's the reason
Exactly.
that a man wouldn't want a kid
I mean, I think
unless
maybe people who have a more solid idea of what it's like. Maybe people who
Right.
come from really difficult
Yeah.
families and don't want to necessarily carry that on.
Right. I actually have heard men say I don't want to bring a kid up in this world
Yeah.
type of thing.
Stuff like that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll say we could probably know a few
Mm-hmm.
who are still good.
Yeah.
All right. I love that. Can you leave us with a quote or piece of advice that we can take away?
About anything.
Anything, but it could be dating related or it could just be life.
Yeah. I mean, I would just say you're the only one living your life. So do things for yourself, not for the approval of other people.
Love it.
Yeah.
Where can everyone listen to Balanced Black Girl?
You can listen to Balanced Black Girl wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes come out every Tuesday. And then you can find me on socials at Balance Less.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Les.
Thank you for having me.